It's B. So before I get started with today's video, I just want to get this out of the way real quick. I'm going to be discussing some potentially very upsetting topics and themes in today's video, so if at any point you're like, ooh, this one's not going to be good for my mental health, don't feel obligated to continue. You can just skip over this one. But with that said, let's get started. So, for the next installment of my series of the Women of Survival Horror, I will be talking about both the protagonist, Fiona Belli, and one of the antagonists, Daniella, from Haunting Ground, a lesser known survival horror game released by Capcom in 2005. Since Haunting Ground isn't nearly as famous or well known as games like Resident Evil or Silent Hill, I'm going to do my best to summarize what exactly happens in the game before we get around to talking about the actual women themselves. Unlike Resident Evil 4, where in my previous video I talked about Ashley, Fiona is the main character of the game, so everything that happens in the game happens directly to her. And so we can't really get around to talking about the women until we talk about all of the things that they go through during the course of the game. Now seems like a good time to tell you that this might take a little bit, so if you want to go get a snack or some coffee, now would probably be a good time, and with that said, buckle in. Haunting Ground takes place in Belli Castle, a place swarming with horrors of every kind and home to generations of alchemists searching desperately for Azoth, something which is being described as the essence of life, and something which our protagonist has, unfortunately. We play as Fiona, who, as the game begins, is locked in a cage, confused as to how she got there, has no idea where she is, no clue what's going on, and is completely naked save for what appears to be a silk bedsheet that she is loosely draped in. Within seconds of the game beginning, we are introduced to one of the primary themes of this game, voyeurism. As our first pursuer, Debilitus, a large, incomplete homunculus created by one of Belli Castle's alchemists, looks down on our sleeping body and even reaches out to touch us before being scared away by the thunder roaring outside of the castle. As we make our way out of what seems to be the kitchen, we find a bedroom. As we enter the bedroom and cautiously look around, it appears as though we're being secretly observed by Daniella, the maid of the castle, who is also a homunculus and is too incomplete, just in other ways we'll discuss later on in this video. Suddenly, Daniella appears at the side of the bed, staring coldly at our nearly naked protagonist, and tells us that she has laid out some clothes for us to put on. Fiona asks Daniella not to leave, asks where she is and how she got there, but Daniella only responds by looking past Fiona to a portrait hanging on the wall behind her and says, "Yes, master, we will keep her here for a while. I will make sure she stays comfortable," and leaves the room. As Fiona begins to put on the clothes that Daniella has left for her, it becomes apparent that the portrait on the wall is being used to spy on Fiona as she changes. A man's ragged breathing can be heard as she undresses, unaware that someone is watching her. As Fiona walks closer to inspect the painting, the voyeur's eyes shift downwards, and Fiona places her hand over her stomach. This entire scene serves as foreshadowing for many of the major themes of the game. Firstly, voyeurism, as I mentioned before. Secondly, the view of the female body as property. And lastly, fertility, or the lack thereof. Alrighty, mental health checkpoint time. So if any of the themes that I just mentioned are going to be exceptionally hard for you to hear about or watch, I'm just letting you know from here on out it's going to get much more graphic. So know your limits, don't push yourself too hard. With that said, let's go. Fiona finds her way out of the room to begin exploring the castle. Shortly after traveling down one of the castle's many dark and dingy corridors, Fiona spots the shadow of Debilitus on the wall ahead, the homunculus I mentioned earlier. And so begins the first pursuer section of the game. As we approach, Debilitus, whether by mistake or on purpose, hurls his doll in our direction, scaring Fiona and causing her to fall to the ground. Debilitus picks up his doll and we shift to his perspective as he looks back and forth from the doll to Fiona, to the doll again, and back to Fiona once more. He throws the doll to the side and sets his sights on us as we lay vulnerable on the floor just feet away, loudly exclaiming and crying out, "My dolly." It's important to mention that Debilitus does not mean us any harm. He quite literally thinks that we're just a very big dolly running around the castle and just wants to play with us. Fiona describes him in her in-game diary by saying, "the size of a giant and the mind of a child." But this fact doesn't make his pursuit of us any less terrifying, and it serves as an example of our second theme, seeing Fiona as an object, in this case, a literal inanimate doll. Not long after the beginning of Debilitus's pursuit of us, we have our first encounter with Ricardo, the castle's groundskeeper. Though we cannot see him, he speaks to us, telling us that he has something he's been wanting to show us, and instructs Fiona to pull away the sheet positioned upright on the couch behind her. As Fiona walks closer, it becomes apparent that this is a person, or at least was a person. Fiona rips the sheet down and gasps as she realizes that sitting on the couch is the mummified body of a pregnant woman. Ricardo says, "Beautiful, isn't it? That, my dear, is what you will become in the future, and you will be mine, Fiona." This is our first indication of why she's really been imprisoned here, for her body. More specifically, for her womb. Fiona's fertility is what causes Ricardo to pursue her. What he wants her womb for, however, is revealed later on in the game. Shortly after passing out, we get out of bed. We hear a dog whining somewhere in the distance. We look out the window and see down below a dog tied to a tree with wire. We rush to help him and tell him not to get caught next time. Not long after this, the dog comes to our rescue to protect us from Debilitus, scaring him away and attacking him on our command. After the dog successfully rescues us, we thank him and realize that this is Huey, the dog whose collar we found lying on the floor shortly after awakening in the cage at the beginning of the game. Huey quickly becomes our new best friend, capable of finding items for us, protecting us from enemies, and helping us with puzzles and obstacles along the way. After a few more terrifying encounters with Debilitus that are mostly spent hiding behind doors, under couches, or simply running for our life, we come upon a door which we hear a discussion happening behind. As we look through the keyhole, we see Daniella being interrogated by Ricardo, who violently abuses her, repeatedly smacking her as she stares utterly expressionless. As Ricardo exits, Daniella, somehow sensing our presence behind the door, looks in our direction, a smile spreading across her face. Later on, we fight Debilitus with Huey as our sidekick, eventually dropping a chandelier on him. After releasing himself from under the weight of the chandelier, he bows to us and sulks away, later giving us a key and seemingly begging for our forgiveness, thus ending the section of the game with Debilitus as our pursuer. As we go to use the key we just received to enter the next area, a blood-covered hand suddenly appears, gently caressing ours, and we turn to see that Daniella is just inches away from our face, creepily beckoning us to come to dinner in a way that appears like she may be trying to kiss Fiona. At dinner, Daniella confides in Fiona that her creator said that he made her to be the perfect woman, yet she cannot taste, experience pleasure, or feel pain, remarking that she is incomplete, a theme we will delve into deeper as we learn more about Daniella. Fiona, seemingly having been fed bad food, has begun to feel woozy and decides to lay down and take a nap. We then see a cutscene where, while Fiona is sleeping, Daniella is running her hand along her body, then abruptly slamming her hand down where, below her skin, Fiona's uterus would be located. This wakes Fiona up, and within a few moments of her waking, Daniella remarks once again that she is incomplete, and then begins violently slamming her head into a mirror over and over, eventually breaking the glass and picking up one of the shards. She kisses her reflection in it, then begins wielding it as a sword. This marks the beginning of the section of the game where Daniella acts as our pursuer. While Daniella pursues us, we can lead her into several traps where she steps in front of a mirror and begins screaming and crying hysterically at the sight of her reflection, distracting her for enough time to allow us to get away. I would like to mention that Daniella's pursuer music, that being the music that plays to indicate that she's nearby and alerts us to run or hide, is extremely fitting for her character. The best way to describe it would be robotic moaning. I think that it really encapsulates her character very well because since she's unable to feel pleasure or pain, she cannot be intimate with anyone and is instead more robot, or in this case homunculus, than human, an empty shell of a person. Barren. During this portion of the game, we come across a room containing many naked female mannequins, one of which is even wearing a wig, and an old-timey film projector. Upon playing it, we discover that someone has not only been secretly watching us the entire time we've been in the castle, but they've been recording us as well, even while Fiona was undressing. Daniella finds us here and corners us. Fiona asks her what she wants and why she's following her, and Daniella says in this moment that she's after Azoth, the essence of life, the essence of woman, something which she lacks as she is incomplete, and begins laughing hysterically. During the final battle against Daniella, she gives a truly haunting monologue, which I will include in full just so you can experience it for yourself, then discuss it afterwards.
flesh woman. You vile creature. You lure the man into your filthy body again and again, and you are allowed to do it because you are a precious, precious little prince. Precious, precious little princess.
During this scene, Daniella calls Fiona a blood-flesh woman, a vile creature who lures men into her filthy body again and again, which she can do because she is a precious, precious princess. We will discuss the significance of this monologue later in the video, but suffice it to say, this is a great example of the intense rage and jealousy Daniella directs at Fiona as a result of her being an incomplete woman. We kill Daniella, impaling her on a giant piece of glass, which causes her to smile, genuinely smile, because this means she is finally free from her burdened and monotonous, unfeeling life. As we near the end of the game and we are cornered by Ricardo in the forest, it's revealed to us that he is a clone of Fiona's father, meaning that technically he would be her uncle. And he intends to use Fiona's womb to force her to rebirth him, allowing him to live forever. As we see a flashback to the car accident that knocked Fiona unconscious and killed her parents before she was kidnapped and brought to the castle, we can more clearly see that it was Ricardo that caused the accident. And as he leans towards our unconscious body in the back seat, his eyes are clearly focused on the waistband of her pants in an obviously suggestive way. This scene makes me physically nauseous, and I don't even like talking about it, but it only gets worse from here, so. During the time that we are unconscious, we are shown a cutscene where Fiona is lying on a dirty operation table. Ricardo does an ovulation test on Fiona and announces another 2 or 3 days at most. I genuinely can't believe that they included this scene in the game. I can't think of anything more vile or disgusting. But it is a horror game, and I guess they just weren't going to go easy on us with the horror. This certainly isn't your average Resident Evil campiness. There's no Jill sandwiches here, but oh god. When we awaken from passing out, our clothes have been changed in our sleep, obviously by Ricardo, into something even more revealing than her previous outfit. Ricardo, later on in the game, even ends up saying, "Let me into your womb," and repeating, "You are mine, I own you." In the good ending of the game, we defeat Ricardo and leave the castle with Huey, Debilitus bowing to us as we turn to look at the castle one last time. However, in the bad ending of the game, we lose to Ricardo. A cutscene plays showing Fiona sitting in an armchair as Ricardo strokes her face, chest, and pregnant belly. Fiona begins laughing hysterically, similar to Daniella, seemingly out of her mind as she rubs her pregnant belly. The implication of this obviously being that Ricardo, her uncle, has succeeded in his plan and has likely forced himself on Fiona and drugged her to keep her in this state. Whew. Okay, well, that was the plot summary portion of the video, and now we're going to get into talking about the women of Haunting Grounds, starting with Fiona. I know that everything in that whole last section was kind of like a lot to take in, so I hope you guys are still hanging in there. If you need to take a break, I get that. And so without further ado, let's get to talking about Fiona Belli. Fiona Belli is 18 years old, and from the moment the first cutscene begins before the title screen, it is immediately apparent that her body is going to be integral to the plot of this game, but not in the way that it is for a typical female character. Though Fiona is obviously a very attractive woman, her looks aren't the main draw. Her body is what every pursuer in the game is after in one way or another. For Debilitus, he wants to own Fiona in the sense that she's a pretty toy for him to play with. Not a human with feelings or emotions, but a plaything, a doll to dress up. For Daniella, Fiona is everything she wishes she was. Fiona is the perfect woman. She has the one thing that her creator wants that Daniella can't provide to him: a womb, fertility. And to Ricardo, Fiona's body is a vessel for his desires. He believes that he owns her body, that it belongs to him to do with what he pleases despite her protests. From the moment Fiona wakes up at the beginning of the game to the moment she leaves through the castle's gates at the end, she is absolutely terrified. As was the case with Ashley Graham from Resident Evil 4, Fiona Belli is a damsel in distress. She has no other defense other than to hide, kick, or command Huey to attack enemies. And unlike many characters in horror titles, she never becomes desensitized to the terror that she's faced with. I think that's one of the many major things that I like about Fiona's character. She doesn't have a full 180 as far as personality goes during the course of the game. She's still herself. She still doesn't want to hurt anyone. She just wants to go back to her normal life. Character development is a great thing, but it seems like every horror movie and game under the sun has at some point fallen victim to having their timid and shy characters become stone-cold badasses by the end, and I am very thankful they didn't do this with Fiona. Her personality being, well, literally just that of an 18-year-old girl is what makes this game so scary. Having been an 18-year-old girl myself just a couple years ago, I don't believe, even if I was put in a situation as crazy as this, that all of a sudden I would just be totally unafraid and completely level-headed in the face of pure evil. I would be scared shitless. I would be terrified. I mean, they can't really expect us to believe that everyone's just gonna suddenly become the Terminator just because they're put in a scary situation. Fiona herself does seem to be pretty shy and quiet. The most we get to see of her personality is tucked away in her in-game diary, which she makes entries in every now and again. One that I find to be particularly telling says, "It's that weird maid again. She keeps staring at herself in the mirror like she hates herself or something." I can't see why. Her skin, her eyes, her body, they all look fine to me. Oh well, blame society, I guess. I think these entries really do a great job of showcasing what Fiona is like as a person, because she seems to me to just be like an average 18-year-old girl. She even sounds like an average 18-year-old girl with the way she writes. So having all of these horrible, nefarious things happen to her are all the more horrifying because she seems so real. It literally sounds like reading my own diary with the way she writes, so it's hitting a little bit too close to home for me. Fiona's story is the everyday experience of a woman taken to the extreme. Every problem she's faced with in the castle is in some way directly related to her body, and as I'm sure we all know, in real life, women's bodies are constantly a point of contention. Whether it be their shape, their weight, their bra size, the jealousy women feel towards one another's bodies, or the absurd objectification women's bodies face by different forms of media and by the men who take advantage of women because they feel like they owe them something. Even the things we cover our bodies with are controversial. It's either too much or too little. You will either look too matronly or look like a stripper. Wear the wrong thing and people will either think you're a prude or say you're asking for it. For women, there's no winning in the realm of bodies. Even for a game that is so close to getting the point, Haunted Grounds still falls short of truly grasping the challenges that women face in regard to their bodies. The unlockable alternate costumes for Fiona include both a dominatrix outfit, which is called illegal in some states, and consists of leather lingerie and a riding crop, and a Texas cowgirl outfit, which is quite literally just a bra and assless chaps. The reason I bring up these outfits is to draw attention to the fact that for a game that seems to understand how terrifying it is to be essentially hunted and desired to the point of violence for your body, they sure do love to wildly over-sexualize Fiona. It's one thing to have moments where the sexualization is the horror, like waking up in a cage with only a sheet to cover yourself with no idea how you got there, but to just randomly put her in assless chaps or leather lingerie for no reason completely defeats the purpose of the game and is honestly just silly considering how serious the themes of this game are. Daniella, Fiona's direct antithesis, is one of the most tragic characters I can think of. Now, I know she does some crazy, terrifying, and awful things, but truly, I feel so bad for her. Her jealousy towards Fiona is almost heartbreaking in a fucked up kind of way. During Daniella's various monologues, she reveals that though she was created to be the perfect woman, she cannot experience pleasure, she can't feel pain, she can't taste, and most importantly to her and her creator, she cannot give birth. Her infertility being the source of her self-hatred because she cannot provide to her creator the one thing he wants the most, and due to her inability to feel pleasure or pain, she can't feel true joy or experience the grief she must feel knowing that she is, as she puts it, incomplete. Daniella, though she is a homunculus and not a true human, still struggles with something that many real-world women struggle with as well. According to the Office on Women's Health, about 10% or 6.1 million women in the US alone struggle with infertility. What I'm getting at here is infertility is a very real thing that many women around the world struggle with, and it can be devastating emotionally. It's one thing to make the decision not to have children, but to have the decision ripped out from under you, to never even be given the chance to decide for yourself, is another thing entirely. Historically, women who were infertile were treated as being less valuable, sometimes being referred to as barren, or even blamed for their own inability to bear children. In some cases, women who are determined to be infertile feel as though they aren't a proper woman. They're inadequate, or believe that their inability to become pregnant constitutes a loss of feminine identity. They may be seen or feel like they are a lesser, incomplete woman, the way Daniella feels. Daniella's own self-hatred based on her infertility has taken out as violent rage towards Fiona. In the cutscene where she runs her hand along Fiona's body, suddenly slamming her hand down, sort of clawing at the area where Fiona's uterus is, really demonstrates this vicious jealousy that she feels towards Fiona's ability to bear children, to be a complete woman, to be capable of feeling pleasure or pain or giving her creator the one thing he wants the most. Even though in Fiona's case, she doesn't want this at all. This was never her decision. During Daniella's later monologue, where she venomously refers to Fiona as being a precious, precious princess because of her ability to be intimate with another person, this point is only driven further. It's not just her fertility that Daniella wants, it's her humanity, her ability to have everything that a real woman does. She's told by her creator that she was made to be the perfect woman, but she knows that she's barely even human, let alone a true woman. And so her own existence haunts her because she knows that she will never experience what it is to be human. In conclusion, I think that for a game that was initially intended as a spiritual successor of Clock Tower 3, as well as a rejected proposal for Resident Evil 4, this game is truly outstanding. The women in Haunted Ground are incredibly well written, especially Daniella, and Fiona's play is very effective in scaring the absolute shit out of me. Haunted Ground by far is one of the scariest survival horror games in my opinion, and the themes that this game delves into are some of the most disturbing I've seen even discussed in the genre. And though I do think we could have probably done without the fan service alternate costumes, I think that the game does a good job of exploring body horror with an entirely new meaning. So I know this was a bit of a heavier one, and certainly not as campy as Resident Evil 4, but I do hope that you enjoyed the video, and thank you to everyone for watching. I hope you all have a good day or night or whatever time it is wherever you are, and I will see you all next time.